Okay, we're back. I'm still talking about the Constitution in my garden on a Sunday morning, and it is a beautiful Sunday morning. As a matter of fact, I think I have to take my coat off because it's getting pretty warm here. Lovely Chatsworth. Normally, as you know, I'm wearing a suit and tie. And when I originally did this, when I did the first version of this, I was in my kitchen, and I actually put a coat on. I mean, I still had my sweats on, but I put a coat on because I figured, well, I should dress up, you know, kind of a formal guy. And then I realized, come on, be serious. What are the odds that you're dressed up? Zero. Unless you're doing this at work, in which case, well, you probably shouldn't be. Okay, so, yep. Now we're moving on. I just spilled coffee all over my leg. Fortunately, it's cold because it's so damn cold out here. Okay, Article 2. Article 1 is the legislative branch. Article 2 is the executive branch. Now, in the executive branch, as part of the Great Compromise, what the framers decided was to have a singular executive, one executive. We have one president, just one person. And so that was one of the first things that they agreed on. And the president was going to serve for 4 years. So now, I want you to think about this because this winds up being kind of important, kind of interesting. Members of the House serve for 2 years. So every 2 years, the House is up for re-election. The president serves for 4 years. So every 4 years, the president is up for re-election. And then every 6 years, the Senate is up for re-election. Their terms don't overlap. The framers could have made everybody up for re-election at the same time. They could have the president, the House, the Senate, all up for re-election every 2 years. But they didn't, and we'll talk about why later on. So, the president serves for 4 years, and in the original version of the Constitution, the president's terms could be, he could have serve an unlimited number of terms. Now, by the way, I didn't mention that in the last video, but members of the House and members of the Senate can serve for as many years as they want also. There's no limit. Some of these people have served for 40 years, 50 years. They can serve for as long as they want, as long as the people keep voting them back in. And in the original version of the Constitution, the president could do that as well. Now, the reason that I point this out is that after Franklin Roosevelt's presidency, and he served 4 years in office, 4 terms in office, the Constitution was changed, and it limited the presidents to 2 terms of office. So presidents now, oh, my wife is coming up. So presidents can only serve 2 terms of office. Here, come on. Presidents, pardon me? Yeah. Presidents can only serve 2 terms of office. My wife has no idea what's going on, so she's about to come on out here. The method of election, though, was something called the Electoral College. But first, Nancy's got to come over here. Nancy, these are my students. Not live, don't worry, I'm recording this. This is Nancy, my wife. She's like, okay.
You're going to take this out, right?
No, of course not.
Seriously.
Why would I? Isn't my wife lovely? Isn't she lovely? Okay, so pardon?
So uncool, I can't even.
She says
start Saturday morning with a fight.
she's going to pick a fight with me. You know what? We're not going to worry about that. We're going to move on to the Electoral College. So, the Electoral College. This is how we elect our presidents, right? And it's an indirect election. It's an indirect election. And the way it works is this. When we vote for presidents, we're not really voting for the president. So, sorry if you didn't know that. Like, what's Phil talking about? What happens is that electors are chosen in each state for the sole purpose of electing a president and a vice president. So, for example, when you go ahead and if you voted in the last election and you voted for, let's say you voted for John McCain. So you voted for John McCain, and you thought you were voting for John McCain. Really, what you were voting for was somebody to go to the Electoral College and vote for John McCain. That's really the way it works. It's kind of bizarre. And so every state gets a certain number of electoral votes, and I'll tell you exactly how many, and let me first explain to you why that's the case. Back in the day, when they originally started the Constitution, it would be very hard to have a national campaign, to have somebody run for office and go up and down the state of, up and down all the various states, the 13 states, and do a national campaign. There were no TVs, there were no anything, right? There was no radio, there was no anything. They couldn't campaign across the entire state. And so instead what they decided, we got a truck coming by, so it might get a little bit noisy here for a second. Yep, I'm in my front yard. Thought I was joking? I'm in my front yard. So instead what the framers said is, look, instead of going ahead and electing, trying to do some national election, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have people vote for an elector. So let's say, for example, if we were sitting in class, right, and let's say Craig again. Let's say we all go, you know what, Craig's pretty smart. He's a smart guy. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead, and we need somebody to elect, we need to elect a president. We're going to vote for Craig. And Craig is going to go to the capital of our state, and he's going to meet with other people who've been elected by other people in our state, and they're going to get together and they're going to decide who they want to vote for president. So we vote for Craig with the idea that he's going to go ahead and he's going to represent us well. He's going to do a good job. And so the way it would work is that Craig would go to the capital, and other people would go to the capital, and they would get together and they would decide how they were going to vote, and then they would communicate that to the national government. And then that's how we elected our president. Now we still have the same system now, even though we could just have a national campaign. They could just count up the votes. But that's not what we have. We have this old system that sort of we're still doing. Now, we'll talk more about this a little bit later, but I want to just explain to you how they decide how many electoral votes each state gets. So if you look on your lecture notes, what it says is the number of electoral votes that a state gets equals the members of the House of Representatives that a state has plus the members of the Senate that a state has. My hand went off the camera, so the number of electoral votes equals the number of members of the House plus the numbers of the members of the Senate. So for example, in California, right? California, our home state, we have 53 members of the House of Representatives. We have 2 senators, and so we have a total of 55 electoral votes. So let me ask you a question. How many electoral votes does Wyoming have? Look at the formula. 3. Now, if you're not sure how I got 3, be sure to ask that question in the review session, because you might need to know that for the exam. Now, one last thing about the Electoral College. In the original version of the Constitution, this is the way it worked. When we go ahead and let's say we elect Craig, and Craig goes and he represents us, and he goes ahead and he gets to go ahead, and each elector gets to cast 2 votes. They get to vote for 2 people. And the way it works, so he gets 2 votes. So each elector votes for 2 people. The candidate with the most votes and a majority becomes the President of the United States. The candidate with the second most votes goes ahead and becomes the Vice President, right? And if no candidate wins, gets a majority, then the House of Representatives decides. So let me say it one more time. The electors go, they get to vote for 2 people. Then each state sends in all their votes. They total up the number of votes. As long as the candidate that gets the most votes, as long as they have a majority, they have to have a majority of votes, they become the president. The person with the second most votes, even if they do or don't have a majority, the person with the second most votes becomes vice president. And then if no candidate wins a majority, then actually the House of Representatives is the one that decides who the president is going to be. And when the House of Representatives decides who the president is going to be, each state gets 1 vote. It's very important. I want you to keep that in mind. If no candidate for the president gets a majority of electoral votes, then what happens is the House of Representatives goes ahead and they get to select the president. This has happened twice in our history. The House of Representatives gets to select the president, and each state gets one vote. Now, with that, we're going to take a break, and I'll come back and finish up the executive branch.